Okay, Zach. So again, thanks for your time today. And I view what we're going to do as more of a conversation than an interview.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll go through a lot of different topics in a way that makes sense for you and how you want to tell your story. Um, Maybe we can start before we get into the real meat of the interview about music, just to tell me a little bit about your current life situation, including your age, where you live, um, your vocation, if applicable, education, any musical skills. So just tell us about who you are today before we start hearing about your story.
Okay. Well, I'm 35 years old. I currently reside in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which is very far away from where I was born and raised.
Where was
Uh,
that?
I was born and raised in a small town called Hawthorne, Nevada.
Okay.
And when I say small town, it was literally built on a grid, 1 square mile, one stoplight,
Hmm.
out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by roughly 164 square miles of military installation where they
Mm.
did D-mill and blew stuff up. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was, for me, it was quite common that, our main drag, our main street, that we would have, soldiers would be coming down in their tanks on Main Street. And just like, hey guys, what are you doing? And,
Wow.
hearing them doing D-mill all around the clock. So we hear things explode. And
Hmm.
then so that's what I grew up with. And we
Were one of your
trained.
parents involved with the military, or just
My father actually, he was in the military. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. The main reason that he resided in Nevada is for the gold mining industry. He became an engineer, and so he was also on the spectrum.
Mhm.
And engineering was his thing. He was extremely high functioning, and
Mm.
if it came to anything mechanics, um, he I moved out when I was 18, and but I would come over to visit, and I would pull up in the driveway, and he'd be sitting at the kitchen table, and I would walk in, and he'd be reading the paper, and he'd say, "Zach, you need to adjust your timing belt."
Just from the sound of the engine.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And then when I was young, I went to work with him at a couple of the mines, and I started about 15. I was a laborer, and then I had moved up, and I got MSHA and OSHA certified, and I was running heavy machinery, anywhere from a forklift, great all, Skytrack, scissor lift, backhoe, all that.
Right.
And if if uh, if one of our vehicles, if there was an issue with it, he at this point he was in an office, and on a lunch break we would go in, and he'd say, "Yeah, you need to adjust the hydraulics on so and so." And I would just look at him, and he'd say, I could feel the vibration in the floor. That's what it needed.
Yeah.
And the man
Very
was just,
sensitive to
yeah.
sensation. But anyway, I focused you back early, and I did want you to just tell us more about. And I mean, the fact that you're in such a one of the most storied music cities of the whole country can't
Yeah.
be that's not an accident, is it?
And no, it's not.
Okay. So,
It's not. When it comes to vocational stuff, school was very difficult. And being 35 years old now, and growing up in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of research available, for people that are on, the spectrum. And nobody really noticed anything that stuck out other than the fact that I was just the weird kid, you know. And I had a lot of trouble making eye contact, and terrible social skills. What you see most common with people that are on the spectrum. And so when I got into music and it changed my life, um, I ended up dropping out of high school. I just in my senior year I couldn't take it anymore, and my mother was very supportive of my music career, and she said, do what you feel that you need to do. And so I did. And by the time I was 18, I was I've had some good success. I released 2 records under a band that I fronted. I wrote all the songs. I did everything. We were called Ode to Nothing. And so by the time I was 18, we were doing, touring the state and playing the cities, got radio play, then toured regionally, and then started getting radio play on Sirius XM and a few places overseas, other countries. For some reason, we were pretty popular in Australia and in France. And
which station on Sirius XM were you being played on?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Oh, because they're such niche,
yeah,
60s, 70s, 80s, 90s metal.
Yeah, and this was back when they were 2 separate companies.
Right.
And,
I go back that far with Sirius.
Yeah. And so it was a little different, and it was easier to for someone independent. It was easier to track down a DJ and talk to him. And now
hey, but before we get your history, just tell us today. So you're 35, living in Muscle Shoals. Are you currently working, or what's your current situation?
My current situation is, and sorry, I told you I talk a lot.
That's okay. And if you don't mind, I'll just steer us right back.
Yep. All right. So Muscle Shoals, Alabama. I am 35. I am now technically disabled. But before that and continuously now, my full-time job is music, and it has been for several years.
And that's mainly composing, performing, recording your own music or other people's, or both?
It's a little bit of both. When it comes to other people, I don't really do that. I do have producer credits, and I like to help other people. But my main thing is my songwriting, my recording, my releasing albums.
Okay, good. That just to sort of set things. So I got to ask you though, what brought you to Muscle Shoals? Was it the reputation of the city, or the music scene there, or some other reason?
Well, it kind of ties in with some other some medical issues and stuff. So
okay.
Yeah, if you want,
let's wait till we get there.
To give you a basic answer, yes, Fame Studios is worldwide famous, and they're here in Muscle Shoals. They're the ones who created the Swampers. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were the premier group of sessions players who played on hundreds of records with people like Aretha Franklin.
Oh yeah. Are you going back 60s? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, that studio still remains. Their office and studio is right down the street from me.
It's really funny. Just an aside, I don't know if you saw the movie on Aretha that just came out, but there's a great scene. She releases like 6 albums in New York with top shelf studio musicians. None of them go anywhere. And she and her producer, Jerry Wexler, I think it was. I can't remember who her producer and agent was. They don't know what to do, and he gets her to go down to Muscle Shoals, and she walks in, and like all these guys are white, and she was not expecting that.
Yeah.
But she comes in, they just start doing something, they fall into this groove, and you could just see everybody's eyes like, yeah, this is what we were looking for. It's a beautiful scene. If you haven't seen the movie, I think that scene in particular, you'll really love it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I'm glad that they brought that up, because they really did have a lot to do with her career.
The implication was she wouldn't have been successful without that artistic meeting, because she was doing all this other stuff, and nobody knew what music to give her voice. They didn't know how to create the right context for her.
Yeah,
they were trying to pigeonhole into a more 50s torch traditional singer. It wasn't working.
Yeah, and it's sad that happens all too often with artists.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I said it's sad that happens all too often with artists. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically, there was someone on American Idol. Her name is Siobhan. She was here working with Fame, and at the time I was living in another state, and my entertainment lawyer called and said, hey, how would you feel about taking a back seat instead of being the front man, because I've always been the front man, the singer, and they wanted a guitarist and they picked me, and so I moved here for that. And just to touch on it quickly, on my way here, her bass player, who was also the love of her life, um, got in a horrible accident on the highway, and he passed.
Mm.
And she just, music and their love was so intertwined that it kind of destroyed her
Wow.
wanting to do
Sorry.
anything with music. So, but yeah, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
here.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask you to go way back, and if you can talk about whatever your earliest memories of music were. You know, as a kid, what was there music in your house, in your family? Did it play a role in any of your early relationships? Just, what are your early memories of music in your life?
Well, um, and that's one of the things I think that this happening is great, because of the fact that I don't know how many other people on the spectrum have dealt with this, but in my case, what makes it very unique is there was no music in my
Mm.
home. And uh, my mother, she listened to, I mean, we had a record player, and there was so many records. And when I was able to, something happened where then I could listen to music. But beforehand, she would play the Beatles, the Doors, Beethoven, and I couldn't listen to any of it. And then my friends also, we were young, and at that time it was, hey, listen to this new Ozzy Osbourne record, or Marilyn Manson, or anything. I could not listen to music. It was
What would
so
happen?
it
I
was
mean, what?
overstimulating.
Oh,
it would
okay.
it would make me sick to my stomach, and literally to the point that it would induce vomiting.
And it was any type of music. It didn't
Any type,
matter. Yeah.
any type.
And
It
was that the only auditory stimuli that you had that reaction to?
No, no, the sound of uh, school was terrible. Um, Grocery shopping, anything. That's I've always avoided public events. Even to this day, unless I'm performing, something happens to me when I perform where it all changes. But if I'm a spectator, it's way too overwhelming. I'm 35, and I still have a tough time shopping. Going to Walmart, and if they're busy, um, if I can't get everything that I need in about 20 minutes, then I have to come back later,
Mm,
because it's just it's all too much.
right. And did your folks understand that, or were they really puzzled by it? Do you recall how it was there any reaction in the family to that?
Um, they yeah, they knew that there was something. Uh, my mother was she was not coddling, which I'm very thankful for, but she was very intuitive, and
Hmm.
she had noticed that after I was born, about 6 weeks after, every time that she would try to hold me, I would fidget, and I would be very uncomfortable. And so she at this time didn't know what autism was, but she knew that there was something with me
Yeah.
physically or neurologically. And then when I was 2, um, I was walking around and using the coffee table to move around, and I had fallen, and everybody thought that I was fine. Well, I had fractured my collarbone, but I didn't wince. I didn't make a noise. Everything was fine. And it wasn't until about 2 or 3 days later, when my shirt was being changed, uh, when I tried to lift the one arm,
Right.
I went, mm, and that was enough for my mom to say, if he made a noise like that, something's wrong. So I went and took X-rays, and yeah,
And then they saw that.
yeah,
Right.
and so she knew that there was something,
Right.
you know.
And I mean, somebody with your dad's level of accomplishment, there was no understanding that someone like that could be on the spectrum in those
Yeah,
days. I mean,
yeah,
anybody with it was, they were just considered, idiosyncratic or
Yeah.
unusual in their own way, but not. So your mom would not have been looking for any sign like of
No.
that with you as a young child. So were there times where you were forced to experience music and it was problematic, like in school or um, any other area where this was really a problem, difficult for you?
Yeah. In school, that's pep rallies,
Mm,
loud music, just terrible. And I'd usually end up either just going into if we were in the gym, then I would end up going in the other room to where the weightlifting area was, or I would just skip, not show
right.
up. You know, if there was any opportunity for me to just kind of sneak away without getting in trouble, I took it.
And it was your way of positively coping with something that was very painful for you. It was, I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
was,
was.
yeah,
I mean, like literally, physically, it was painful. I
yeah.
mean, it would make me shake. It would make me vomit. There's a couple other things that are too overstimulating that bothered me back then and still bother me today, that are visual as well.
Hmm.
Uh, the the art form of claymation. Watching claymation will make me very sick
Uh-huh.
and very
That,
overwhelmed feeling. I get a feeling of just panic and anxiety.
it's something about the way the motion is
Yeah, that's
artificial, but you can, like it, you could see it's not
yeah,
continuous. It's broken up into bits.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly. That's
Yeah.
just seeing it is just, and for what you said, yeah, visually it's kind of real, it's kind of not.
Yeah.
The stop animation, yeah,
Right.
it just does something to my system and makes me feel sick.
And the challenge with music, was it the same whether the music was live or recorded or whether it was background music in a film or TV? Or, I mean, were there differences in the way music affected you, or was it pretty much consistent?
Um, there were different intensity levels, and I don't watch TV, I don't watch movies, I
Okay.
never really have. Um, and even being a full-time musician, there's still a lot of music that I don't listen to. I talk with other musicians and they're like, oh, this new band, and did you hear this new single, and this and that, and I'm like, what? No.
Mm,
I have a very small select group of artists
right.
that I really enjoy, and I listen to their entire catalogs.
Right.
The Beatles being one, the Doors being one, Steppenwolf.
Mm.
I know their whole catalog, but I never really branched out. And just for being a musician, I guess I wouldn't qualify as a music lover.
Well, I I don't know. I mean, all music lovers have their own range of tastes. Some are very
Mine's just
selective and
very
narrow,
limited.
and some are broad.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, well, okay. You mentioned, social challenges too. I'm
Hmm.
just wondering. Well, again, for many of the people I talked to, um, music was one area, where they could make relationships and or bond with people around that, and it seemed like probably that wasn't available to you. So it made I'm wondering, I guess, how it your challenges with music might have made it tougher to make friends as an adolescent, be part of a group, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was. It did make it tough because the group of friends that I had, it was not large. But we were kind of and you know how school is. You're different. You got your football players, your jocks, your nerds, your quote unquote outsiders or freaks, and I was in that group.
Yeah.
Where everybody wore some kind of heavy metal T-shirt and had their hair colored and their fingernails painted, and
Yeah.
those were my people.
Right.
And they were pretty understanding once they figured out that if we were hanging out and music was being played and I had to leave, um,
Yeah.
and then eventually they would ask me, or I would just bring it up. I'd talk about it, and they were all very receptive of my
Interesting that
issues.
the most accepting people were those who might have been marginalized by the
Yeah,
majority.
yeah, and I was very lucky to grow up in the town that I did, because the groups were very small and close, and paid attention to
It's
each other.
interesting. So you were part of a musical subculture in which you shared something, but not actually the music.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
really,
That's
really interesting.
Yeah, I'd be the one standing outside looking through the window. Like, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah. So there had to be a time, a moment, something when a lot of this switched, where music became something that was intolerable to something that became your path in life. Um, do you remember when what started to change and how it changed? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I picked up an instrument.
What was that?
My first instrument was the flute.
Okay. In
Yeah,
school, like in a concert band or orchestra or something, or
it was in school. Um, I was I was at a friend's house, and his father had found an old guitar that he had in the shed or something like that, and he brought it in to wipe it off. And I knew what music was. I knew it involved instruments. I've heard it. It made me sick. I'm very well aware.
mm.
But then seeing one, I was like, yeah, hey, can I touch that? He said, yeah, go for it.
Mm.
So I picked it up and I started plunking, and it just it made sense somehow. And I think what it was is I found out rather quickly that I could listen to something, and I mean, I couldn't listen to music, but then if I had a guitar, I could listen more on like a scientific aspect, and then I could find the notes and I could play it and learn by ear. And so it totally changed the dynamic of music and what it was for me. Um, and so I said, hey, this thing's really cool. Can I borrow this?
Were you able to get a sound out of the flute the first time you picked it up?
It happened rather quickly. Yes.
I mean, that's not easy to do. You must have had some real natural understanding and skill in that area.
I did. Once it became more of a scientific thing to me, and learning how instruments work, then I'm fairly
Mm.
proficient at several instruments. From playing the flute, and this is kind of an offshoot because I don't use any of this in my music, but playing the flute, understanding that it's a woodwind and how the keys work and what notes. Then I picked up a bagpipe, and for the very first
Interesting.
time, and I played Amazing Grace,
Ha.
because I was able to understand the differences and similarities of an instrument that used finger holes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just kind of branched off. I play the didgeridoo, a harmonica, anything
Mm.
stringed I can pretty much play.
Right.
Uh, you know, um, some things a lot more proficient than others, but
You know, I just want to check something with you because there's a lot going on here. I mean, first, it's clear that your conceptual understanding and skills was a bridge to music, like seeing, like you clearly have strong abstract skills because you were able to see the connection among instruments, which on the surface are quite different.
mhm.
But your intellectual abstract skills seem very integrated on the bodily level, that you were able to pick up and get sounds out of these instruments and play them. Now, the instruments you mentioned, you know, if you had told me the first thing was acoustic guitar or piano, I would have expected that just because a sensitivity to sounds. Picking
Mhm.
up flute, which people can hear is shrill. Bagpipes, I know some people have a tough time with that sort of sound.
Mhm.
It's just interesting. Those are very complex sound waves, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just striking to me that that was your way in through these sounds, which other people might find a little more difficult to
Yeah.
engage with. Any thoughts about that?
Um, it just hearing you say it that way, it just kind of it made me think about how my father was with things when it came to engineering.
Mm,
Is his very scientific understanding of, well, if this thing works this way, then this one probably works this way,
mm.
and so that very technical, and then and I guess it's I mean, this is like a terrible analogy, and I'm just coming up with it. But things are scary. Some things can be scary until you understand them.
Sure.
You know, and and then so just having a natural knack for doing these, the I guess, and the flute was by accident actually. I thought that the flute was a different instrument because I didn't do my research. I didn't know anything about music,
Sure.
and so I picked the flute by accident, and I can't even remember what I thought it was, but I thought it would be something a lot cooler. Not that the flute isn't cool, but
Well,
when
listen, I
you're
grew up in the 60s and we had Ian Anderson and Jethro
yeah,
Tull. So the
yeah,
flute was pretty cool there, but not since
yeah.
then, I guess.
It's well, in my dynamic here, I am in in school band, and you have all the football players, and then and then you have like the drummers and the
Yeah.
all this, and then here I am in I'm a big dude. I'm built, I'm on a large frame, and then I'm around a bunch of people that are half my size and female, and I'm like, yeah,
Right.
so
You
it
should
was,
be playing tuba or bass drum, dude, right?
yeah, yeah. And our band teacher was like, if it wasn't written by Sousa, then it isn't music.
Oh,
So we weren't allowed to have stringed or electric instruments.
mm,
Otherwise, I would have said guitar.
right.
And I don't know. I'm sure that maybe what it was is I heard that, okay, well, we can't have guitars or something. Flute sounds familiar because I think this band used one or some maybe Jethro Tull or something. And so I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'll pick that. That's got to be cool.
Yeah.
So I picked it, and then it showed up in a little case like this, and I
Yeah,
opened it
right.
up, and
Easy to carry.
I'm like, what is this? And that's your flute. I made a mistake, you know, but I stuck with it, and
Yeah.
it's actually it was very upsetting to me. Yeah, it started in middle school, and then it got serious in high school. And our band teacher was very I mean, he was hardcore. He was actually in the Marines,
Right.
and in it for a career, and so he went up the ranks, and then he started out as a private, went and fought and defended our country, came home, and then was moving up the ranks, and then he was the one who had the privilege of yelling at all the new people. So that carried on into school, and so he treated us like we were in the military. It was very strict.
Right. Yeah.
But by the time I was very fortunate to have him as a teacher, it was by the time that we were just starting in high school, we were playing high school and college level pieces, and we were winning awards, and
Mm.
and I think maybe that helped a lot too with me because it put the focus less on music and more about I guess like an academic aspect
Achievement.
to it. Yeah,
Yeah. Hey,
which
you Yeah, you mentioned something. I've been holding it because you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, and I just don't want to forget, which I think is important. You said this that sometimes when you don't understand something, it's frightening or
yeah,
scary. And it's what it sounds like to me is you were able to apply your abstract conceptual abilities to music. You found a way through the flute that day,
yeah,
and that took away maybe some of your visceral sensory physical reaction to music was had a psychological or emotional dimension, and now once you understood it, some of the fear of music was removed and you were able to engage with it. Do you think something like that might have been going on?
yeah. I do. In a lot of ways, that's how my brain works with most things. So yeah, that's a very good way. It's very, that applies very well. Um, Yeah, if there's something that I don't understand, especially if it's something that even though I don't understand it, it may interest me, then give me a day and I'll understand all the mechanics behind it. And
Mhm.
then, you know,
And
so yeah,
listen, you also may have been not ready. I mean, as a child, to confront the fear or the unknown or whatever it was. But how old were you when that flute incident happened? When you
oh, I must have been 12 or 13.
Okay, so you're coming into adolescence. You're
Yeah.
moving beyond a childlike
And
understanding of the world.
I did say that was a not a proper analogy because it was just coming, right
Yeah,
off the top of my head. But yeah, it's that music was in no way uh, intimidating or scary or anything. That was just an analogy to
mm,
what it was is it was so overstimulating.
right.
I mean, it was like being electrocuted, which it wasn't a fear-based thing. It was just,
Yeah.
see, when I got diagnosed, um a lot of people on the spectrum have what they would call tagalongs. And so you'll find that someone who is on the spectrum may also have tagalongs like OCD.
Oh yeah. I've
Uh,
talked.
you
I haven't
know,
heard it called that, but a number of the people I've talked to have mentioned things like that.
yeah, they have the way they were referred to, the way they were put it to me was that you have tagalong effects, and they're different with everybody on the spectrum.
Right.
Some of this, I mean, OCD is OCD, obviously, but mine are, I'm agoraphobic, and I have generalized anxiety disorder and extreme social anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the music and large crowds, just all of that it's too much. It's
Mm-hmm.
like having everything on the way that my brain, and this is probably a bad way to describe it, but it's the only way I know how. Like when I go into Walmart, I don't just hear noise from the people. I hear the floor buffer and I know which part of the store it's in.
Mm-hmm.
I hear the baby over there crying and I hear what the mother or father is telling that child. And then I hear the conversation of someone as and I it's not like I'm trying to zone in all that, all that just happens. So all this is going on,
Right.
plus whatever they're saying over the loudspeaker, I'm hearing that and I'm understanding it.
How
And the
about the
person behind
hum
me,
of the lighting?
everything,
That type. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And then I'll hear someone halfway down the aisle and they're like, oh, I'm looking for, they're just either just, speaking out loud, or they're talking to somebody that they're with. And they're like, oh, I was looking for refried beans. I mean, I'll even hear that. Like, hey, it's just, you're just down one more aisle,
Yeah.
and so what happens is it's like, instead of being able to focus 100% of my attention on one thing, I focus 100% of my attention on all things. Each thing gets
Mm-hmm.
100%, and that's what becomes so overwhelming. And then it'll make me feel sick, and then I will start to shut down.
Right.
And
You know, something I've talked about because I've been teaching music therapists for a long time now, and often when I find myself talking about autistic kids and music therapy, I'll talk about how for folks on the spectrum, well, put it this way, for neurotypical folks, there seems to be a mechanism where they can put things in the visual and auditory foreground with their attention more easily and let less relevant factors fade into the background more. And so I've often speculated, I think, a neurodiverse way of the way that your brain works. It doesn't naturally do that in the same way that neurotypical people do, put things in the background so I can just focus on what's important. And I've talked about how what's interesting is a lot of autistic kids I've worked with in music very easily categorize foreground and background in music. They know a melody, they know what's important, they can feel and reproduce melodies, and they understand what defines the piece of music, not just the drum beat. So I'm wondering, how does that relate to your experience of music, your experience as a composer? Because as a musician and composer, you really have to have a clear sense. As a producer, it's all about what is in the foreground, midground, background of the mix. And so you have a very advanced skill with foregrounding and backgrounding as a producer, but in daily life, that doesn't happen so much, it sounds like.
No, not in daily life.
Sorry if that was a really long-winded.
No, I'm very glad.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that you brought that up and said it the way that you did. Because it's, you know, I do a lot of, I guess I would just call it independent research. But you see, my social life, even though I don't have much of a social life, unless I am doing something with music, all of my friends are, well, not all, but many of my friends are on the spectrum. We're just a very tight-knit community, and we all understand each other, and we all understand what it is to be overwhelmed, and we support each other. But with the things that I've been fortunate enough to do with my life, in the way that I have come out of my shell, so to speak, in certain ways, I'm very perceptive, and I pay attention, and I watch, and I try to help, and I usually end up helping by you know, comparing, say, hey, you know what I did when I was in that spot, you know, and it works differently for everybody. But I'll never tell anyone what to do, but I will give them something that happened to me personally that might help them come to their own resolution and stuff like that. But so I've had similar conversations to what you were just saying. And especially with me, and that being, you know, having everything separated, and, you know, in music and all that, I say, you know, I'm a professional musician because I mean, that's my job title. But once I get more into an in-depth conversation about it, then I'll end up saying, you know, I'm actually not a musician. I'm not. I am an artist, and my canvas is sound. And that's what I go by, because I can't read music. I learn everything by breaking it apart and doing it with my ear. And it seems that a lot of people on the spectrum are the same way. I know so many singers that are on the spectrum who have perfect pitch, or they can wake up and you can play something for them or sing a lyric, and it's something they've never heard before, an original piece, and then let them go through their day, and then at dinner time say, sing me that melody, and they can.
Right.
You know, and it's just and then, because everybody on the spectrum is different, then you have some musicians on the spectrum who are so technical with writing, and you know, and I think that I'd have to be them to know, but I think that maybe it's more technical with them, and so they feel it less. And then you have the ones who feel more and really don't know anything about the technical side.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. I'd like to try one more time with this understanding how your engagement with music somehow lessened its negative impact on you. And I'm wondering if one possibility was that once you had the conceptual understanding, it simplified that overwhelming diversity of sound. So, for example, I remember I was playing guitar first when I was a kid, and my sister was playing the piano. And one day I sat down at the piano, and I could see I did every major chord in every key, and the notes repeated. So instead of being 88 keys, like how could you learn all the names? I saw, oh yeah, there's 2 black ones, 3 black ones. C is always the one next to the 2 black. So now instead of 88 keys, I saw the whole keyboard, but there were only 12 keys.
Yeah.
It reduced the complexity to a much more simple understanding.